Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Mark Clough and welcome to today's Live at Lunch webinar. If this is the first time that you've joined us, basically these webinars are all designed to actually bring you kind of different parts of photographers' lives, different skills, different kind of visions and so on. And today's no exception, where we're going to be joined by John Rowell. He's going to be kind of talking and showing some of his amazing landscape photography, all based around his mountain. I'm sure it's not just his, but it has the kind of ability. John's going to be joining us now in a minute. Basically, for those who are joining us for the first time, you should just be hearing my voice and seeing what is a PowerPoint presentation in front of you, which obviously is kind of showing you about the Facebook pages moved and so on. We're going to just change slide now, so at least you can just check your vision and so on. So now we should be seeing the top webinar, and if all's okay, we're going to have people joining us kind of as we kind of get in towards the webinar. So why do we do these webinars? That's me, by the way. I'm Mark Clough, I'm your host. Really, John has said the presenter today once he gets going in about 2 or 3 minutes. Once John gets going in about 2 or 3 minutes time, and basically what we're going to be doing is kind of looking into his world, as it were. As far as what is the Photographer Academy, well, we're an online training company for photographers. We're the biggest in Europe as far as our membership is concerned. We operate with 12 different photographers that all donate their time to us. We make video to kind of make sure that the world of photography has a future, and so again, it just kind of allows us to kind of push the boundaries, teach core skills for people who need to have core skills, and as well as kind of looking at the more creative elements and so on. We're lucky enough, we've got a variety of sponsors, including The Last Light, Animoto, Mitsubishi, Sekonic, Towergate, Loxley Color, Elinchron Flash, X-Rite, Quantum on One Software, the Ray Flash, and not forgetting the online sales and storage, which is SmugMug. Why do we need them? Well, we need them to actually allow us to have our Freeview section on the Photographer Academy side as well. So if you don't have any budget and you need some kind of training, then please kind of join up to our Freeview section on the site. We're around about 7,000 members on Freeview alone, in fact, really, so please make use of that and so on. But if you want some more information on the Photographer Academy, either visit our Facebook site, which is facebook.com/The Photographer Academy, or you can go straight to the site, which is the quickest way to us is pt4u.tv, and you'll be able to actually get in there and actually kind of see what's going on and so on. We are recording today, which means that you'll be able to see this again if you're a member of the Photographer Academy forever. Otherwise, if on Freeview for the next 7 days, that should be live by Monday, in fact, really. So as I said, we're joined by John Rowell. John, are you with us?
I am, yes.
Welcome, and thank you so much for giving up your lunchtime as well as your preparation time and rehearsal and everything else to kind of share with not only our members but also those joining us from around the world and so on with it. We've got around about 200 people registered today, and some of them are coming on now as we were, but again, many register so they can kind of watch in the post-op anyway. John, what are we going to be doing today? What are you going to be showing us?
It's about a journey. It's about where it started for me as a 14-year-old, and it's mainly based in Snowdonia because that's where it all started for me. Today's images will all be from Snowdonia.
And I gather that's why it's called the mountain, is it? Or Mountains of Magical Light, yeah. So you're not 14 now, though, of course.
Sorry?
You're not 14 years of age now.
Oh, no.
This is a shot of John. So, John, can you just tell us a little bit about your photographic journey so far?
Okay, it started for me, as I said, at 14, and it's given me a lifetime of pleasure. My mother and father dropped me off at Kapakuri Youth Hostel with a camera and picked me up a week later, and I always think now that people would get locked up if they did that. And it's such a shame because it gives people at a very, when they're really influenced at that age, it had a profound effect on me and has ever since, really.
Brilliant. Before we get going into the full webinar, guys, by the way, guys, please, if you've got any questions that you want to actually pose live to John, get them into the question box. Jay, who's on the question panel with us, Jay's one of our video guys, looks after customer care as well. He will also be looking at the chat box and posting a load of things away for you. So again, if you haven't seen them before, that will include as well some links towards John's Facebook page, his website page, and so on with it, so you can kind of keep in touch with John, look at his work, and kind of, if you're interested in one of his workshops following today's webinar, of course, you can kind of get in touch with John directly. So, John, there's another question that I want to ask really is, what is the definition, or your definition, of a landscape photograph?
Okay, a definition really is, and it'll be part of the talk, is the actual landscape is the canvas. What we're doing as landscape photographers is painting light or atmospheric conditions onto that canvas.
Brilliant. Well, it's that time. I think you should go live with your presentation, John. I'm going to be moving the images forward, so if you just let me know when you want to actually move on to the next images, we can do that, of course. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mountains and Magical Light with John Rowell.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar this afternoon. As I alluded to, it all started for me when I was 14. Mother and father dropped me off at a youth hostel in Capel in North Wales, Snowdonia, and picked me up a week later. Whenever I say now that at lectures, you know, people, I hear the gasp in the audience, because, you know, nowadays it would be frowned upon to leave someone so young, but the impression never ever left me, and that led me really from those mountains of Snowdonia up onto the lakes into Scotland. And then in the years to follow, really it took me to mountain ranges all over the world. And then at some point, we actually decided, you know, what are we doing? We lived on the Wirral, but Marion had a cottage in Snowdonia. We were coming down here at weekends. But it got to the point where I said, and we discussed for a while, you know, what are we doing driving home every weekend on the Sunday evening, especially when you saw sort of magical conditions developing and we were driving home. So we actually made a big decision to move to Snowdonia full-time about 18 months ago. And, you know, we haven't regretted that decision. The benefits that you have by being here full-time is, obviously I can look at the conditions on a daily basis, and, you know, I'll respond to those conditions. And we try to keep things, you know, the diary quite reasonably empty at certain times of the year, which I'll go on later, because we know that they're going to be the key times when we want to you know, be out photographing. So, influences. We all have influences, and there's nothing wrong. It's not copying other people's work. It's being influenced by them, and it is actually you know, it might be a similar style to yours, and most of my influences are, my biggest influence was a guy called, with the same surname as myself, called Rowell. And, you know, over the years, I first came across his work because of the name. I saw it on a book in a mountain shop in Snowdonia, and when I looked through the pages and turned and looked at those landscapes and saw the magical light, I knew that here was somebody that was thinking the same as me. And I bought that book there and then I actually you know, bought the next one, which was The Inner Game of Outdoor Photography, which not only was he a brilliant photographer, but he also, you know, he could, through his writings, you know, really make you think about what you were doing and how you were actually doing it. I was very fortunate. I've been trekking in Morocco, and I met somebody who went to school with him, and I was due to go to Pakistan, but when the towers came down, that was cancelled, and I got a flight to see this friend in America, and she took me to see him for the day. Unfortunately, soon after, he got killed in an air crash, and that was a huge blow, because no longer was it somebody whose work you just admired, he was an actual person. And I made an audio visual about that, because that's where I use multimedia, is if I say to you in a single shot, that's what I want to communicate, then to me that's where it ends. but audio-visual or multimedia comes in when it can't, and there's a copy of that on our website if anybody wants to see it. From a mono point of view, Ansel Adams was a big influence. When I went over to see Gallen, he had an exhibition on in San Francisco, and that was a huge influence, learning about how he printed in earlier life and compared it into sort of later life. Over here, Colin Pryor. Colin Pryor has been a big influence, a Scottish landscape photographer. And when I was speaking to him not so long ago, he was telling me if it wasn't for Gallen Rowell, he would have never ever envisaged a career as a full-time mountain photographer. So you begin then to realize how much or how many landscape photographers Gallen Rowell actually influenced. Funny enough, most of my work that I follow, and I follow a lot of work online, they're mostly the landscape photographers from the West Coast, and they include William Neal and Fatali. And I think there's an appreciation of landscape photography in America far more than it is in the UK. So what's my approach to landscape photography? Well, you have to love your subject. We've made these huge sacrifices to actually come down here and actually spend the whole of my time now to be my seminal work, which is to really dig deep into this landscape. The one that you can see on the screen at the moment is just at the bottom, about 5 minutes walk away from our house. I've photographed this from the same position many times in all sorts of conditions, and use it actually in lectures to to say that this is the canvas. This landscape in front of you is the canvas. What we're doing as landscape photographers is actually painting light and atmospheric conditions onto that landscape. So I've photographed it in every season, at every hour of the day, in every sort of conditions that you can imagine, in order to get across to people that this is just the palette. What we're doing is looking for light. And what we're trying to do really is, I can show you these conditions on this photograph, really in ordinary conditions. What we're trying to do is make them extraordinary. And we do this by a total immersion in the landscape and letting the images come to you. You cannot, certainly in Snowdonia, if you wait for the conditions that you want, then you've had it. So you really have to work with them. This next one is Cwm Idwyl. To get this particular shot, you would have to go really early in the morning because the light comes from the left in this case, but mostly it goes around behind that mountain, and so you really have to be there at the crack of dawn to get that. It's an exceptional place. It's where we take workshop students because it's easy to get to. And what I was really thinking about not so long ago, something that really changed it in the digital world, where people take so many photographs. I saw a quote from Ansel Adams not so long ago that he said that 12 images in a year is a good crop. And so for all the disappointments that we get, if we keep that in mind, and build up a portfolio over the years, that's where we start to build a bigger picture. Nobody will see, obviously, all my days I go out and there's failures. And he also stated that landscape photography is a supreme test of the photographer and often the supreme disappointment. So it's not being afraid of failure. It's about being immersed, and it's about taking the opportunities when they come along. But what fits behind that is a lot of prep work, if you like, going to places, understanding. It's a bit easier now with apps that you can get will tell you where the light will come at any time. But what we're actually looking for is waiting. But why are we waiting? Well, we love being in that landscape, so there is no problems at all with me being there. You just love being out there. And this particular morning that you can see is we're waiting for inversions. There's been lots of inversions in the last few weeks. This one was one from last year. But you know, inversions add atmosphere to those shots, and then we're using the tonal ranges through it to actually give that feeling and the passion that you want to get across to the people that you're communicating with. So it's not, don't be afraid of the failure, but why is it so exciting? Why do we get so excited with landscape photography? It is the unknown. It is the fact that you never know what you're going to get. That when you go out, you can be absolutely, you know, your mind's blown away by the conditions that you find yourself in. And this particular one you can see on the screen, you know, was the light was raking across. And the thing is about Snowdonia is the westerlies that come flying through, and it's those weather patterns that you can see, and the farm on the, you know, the right adds to it. It's a very famous farm from a book called I Bought a Mountain. And when I read that book, it tells you everything that's rugged about this landscape, and that's what you're trying to get actually across. So it's about not fighting these conditions, it's actually working with them. And also, you know, what you're looking for is if it doesn't inspire you when you take it, then it's not going to inspire the people that you're actually, you know, asking to look at your work. In this particular one, Snowdon's on the left, Aaron's there on the right, taken from a lake on the, you know, on the other side of the valleys. But this one's all about sky, and I have a saying, sky, use it or lose it. And that's where you have to start making choices. If it's a sky like this, you're always going to use it because of its, you know, how dramatic it is. If it was what we called, I've got a friend called Ken Scott, you know, a mountain photographer that lives down south, and he said about concrete skies. If you get concrete skies which are just totally grey, then it's all about going in close and, you know, and forgetting the wider landscapes. But in this particular case, you know, it was everything about those that sky and those conditions on that lake. Okay, next one. What makes this one sort of jump out for me? Well, you know, that is Trufan, and the two pillars on the summit are known by mountain people from all over the world. And so just by showing them and the atmosphere that's jumping around, you know, everywhere else, is telling you everything about what, you know, there is about that mountain. You don't always have to show the full mountain. In this particular case, as I say, those two pillars who people actually jump over, would you believe, you know, that's what makes it work for me on that particular one. Okay, next one. Right, sky, use it or lose it. Again, this was a case of, you know, always being ready and having a camera in the car. We were driving back from a meeting in Battersea Coed, and there was just these shapes over the mountain. And so you're always on the lookout for, you know, conditions that take it from the ordinary to the extraordinary. And, you know, where do we use black and white and where do we use colour? We'll be coming to that soon. But up to now, all of these, to me, have been mono images and all part of an exhibition that I had last year. This is one, it was an absolutely phenomenal winter this year in Snowdonia. It went from November and we were still taking conditions like this as late March, early April. This is up in Midwell. What you have to do in cases like this, obviously, is get there before too many people, because what you don't want is footprints in the, you know, the shot. That is Egan, opposite there, one of my favourite mountains to be walking up. But on this particular occasion, it was as stunning as I'd ever seen it. There's another shot, not this particular one, but the rescue were out on this particular day, and I later heard that the casualty never made it. And so you can't imagine how I felt, because to me on this particular day I was absolutely totally immersed in this, you know, the beauty of this landscape, and then heard that somebody also enjoying that particular day never made it. So we always have to remember that they are dangerous places, mountain landscapes, and you do have to respect them. Next one, please. Right, this was, again, being ready. This is Marion's son, and it's all about looking out for the weather forecasts. Weather forecasts are everything around here, and the mountain ones are particularly accurate. And they were staying with us, and I said, you know, I gave my apologies the evening before. I said I'd be likely to be up and out before dawn because, you know, it looks like there could be inversions. Half an hour later, Marion's son said, can I come with you? What I was doing was going to mountain bike up to Glaslyn, which is, you know, in Snowdon Horseshoe there. And he said, I said, fine, yeah, okay. I told him what time we're leaving. Half an hour later, his wife said, can I come? And when we drove up to the pass, we couldn't see a thing, not a thing. And I was so disappointed for them. But as we rode up this pass, things started to happen. The first thing that happened was the mountain in the distance there, which is Chabot, suddenly became just above the clouds. But then it started to colour, and then all hell let loose with the atmospheric conditions. They said they will remember this day for the rest of their lives. And it really was phenomenal conditions that morning. And you can ride your bike up there in summer up until 10 o'clock in the morning, and I often just wander up there. The thing to point out about this one is I don't always take big expensive equipment up in the mountains. This was taken on a compact camera just in my backpack, and it was always to have something with you. And I would have been really disappointed if I hadn't taken even a compact on this morning, because it was truly, truly phenomenal. Okay, next one. Right, wild camping. I've got a friend in Chabot Cafe in Capel Curig, and you know I helped him with a book, a blurb book that you know I make a lot of. It's about projects and it's about bringing bodies of work together. And Paul was going to the Himalaya, and I really got to know him well by helping him with this book. And since then we've been going out doing some wild camping. On this particular morning, we were up by Linkasig Freya, which is just on the Gliders, and you know I woke to these mists in these valleys that, as far as I could see, absolutely phenomenal. Now in this particular case, if we could just go on to the next one, right, and back to the other one, and back again. Right, to me this is where colour takes over from mono. That does not work for me in mono. It is early in the morning, it's got all those tones that should be available in the morning, and this is where the the choices I make about where my photography changes from mono to colour. And certainly in those twilight hours, both in the evening and the morning, those golden hours as they're called in landscape photography, it's not, it's there for a reason. It is because that light is so special at that time of day. It was a phenomenal couple of hours walking around just taking images. Next one, please. Right, totally different. You wouldn't, if I said to you that we live down at the bottom of the Far Lake there and we ran out of milk, and Marion said, can you go into Llanberis, which is just in the middle of those two lakes, and get a some milk? And I went out and I had the camera actually in the car, and I saw these conditions starting. It certainly wasn't anything like this, but I thought the potential was there in effect that something might happen. Now a lot of the time it actually, you can see the blue band at the bottom there. Normally, a lot of the time it can actually just disappear and nothing happens. But this is about the scouting and things that I was talking about before, because I knew this spot would give me these conditions. It's up to the into the Penny Pass car park, and it's a 10 minutes walk up the track, and this view opens up for you. So to me, when I was thinking about these conditions and those clouds, you know, that was the place. So it took me, what, I think it was 15, 20 minutes to drive up there and another 10 minutes walk, and these conditions had started to develop. This goes back to the same one as the bike morning. So again, we're back with the compact again. And, you know, these conditions were changing by the minute. And that was Toby's wife, who was out there. Would you believe she had a phone with her, her iPhone, and she was just capturing what she could. And those mists, they just kept changing and changing, and you're just responding all of the time. You know, your eyes are everywhere looking for it. This is different, again, it's up into that St. Coombe, and what we're doing at the moment is it's playing with light. It's about shafts of light, if you like, coming through. The background was dark, the skies were moody, but just this shaft of light had just lit the foreground there. So it's all about, you know, balancing light. Again, very, very early morning. You can see Shabbat over the far side again, totally different morning. But this was about playing with shapes within it, without that lake in it. Certainly wouldn't have been able to use this. And that cloud formation, and this is the same cloud formation that was coming over, slightly different. Marion's there, but in the foreground. She was doing her own thing there. But to me, it was all about this big blue cloud and that sun rising. Minutes later, it just disappeared behind that cloud, and we never really saw it again. So it's all about the moment. Wild camping again. This was just after the tennis final, funny enough. And I said to Marion, oh, the conditions look good. I'm going to walk up Snowdon and just sleep. And I just took a sleeping bag and a bivvy bag and slept just below the actual summit. It was forecast to be good the following morning. Absolutely nobody there. So you have the whole mountain range to yourself, and then you're looking round. Never dropped below 17 degrees all night, so it was very, very comfortable. And the stars that night were unbelievable. So it's not always about the photography, it's about this immersion in the landscape, and it's about loving that landscape and loving actually being there. Okay? Next one, please. Well, this is a famous view. But what we're doing is, again, looking to add the atmosphere to it. This mist in this valley, you can almost certainly guarantee it during the autumn months. This valley and the next valley, and again, it's understanding the conditions that will, you know, give you this view. And the next valley, further down to the left there, the sun comes up over Shabbat and doesn't really blow that mist off. So you can afford to come here and photograph for a while. And once the mist burnt off here, it's still generally in the Gwynant Valley, and you can go around there and start looking for it. That's Plessy Brennan, the building in the middle there. Again, early morning, you would have to, you know, be there for these. The lakes are generally very, very still until the breezes come up and blow it off. And to me, this is all about shapes. It's all about, you know, looking for, using the landscape in effect to have shapes within it. And this shadow that you can see is actually Tryfan from the other side. So it actually put this shadow there, which to me made the actual image, and the bits of snow and the reflection, obviously. Okay, next one, please. These are unexpected situations. I'd been up into the Snowdon Horseshoe all day photographing, you know, tremendous snow conditions, beautiful day, just really enjoying it. And when I came down, I heard some sort of laughing, and you know, I took a photo of one of these lads snowboarding. Never seen it snowboarding before. And he shouted at me, "Did you get the shot?" And I said, "Not really, it was a bit far away." He said, "Come on, we'll go and set some up further down. There's a great place where they jump off further down." And, you know, Marion must have been wondering where I was, because it was dark by the time I'd finished these. This is about opportunism, because they went jumping for about an hour. I made a video again, which is on the website. And it was just about me enjoying my photography and other people enjoying the environment and whatever, you know, they enjoyed about these winter conditions. They really, you know, enjoyed that day. One of the things I didn't realise when we came to Snowdonia was the amount of sport that went on. There's hardly a weekend goes by without a sporting event. There's one this weekend, which is the Snowman Triathlon at Cap Currig. Last weekend there was a triathlon on Anglesey, which was called the Sandman, which was a beach or a sea triathlon. We've had through Llanberis in the last couple of weeks the Around Britain. We photographed that with Bradley Wiggins and all those types of things. And it just gives you another dimension to your mountain photography. This is the Snowdon race where they run up and down. It's 5 mile up and 5 mile down, and it takes them an hour and 4 minutes, would you believe? And to me, sport is not all about the action of it. It's about the emotion of it, and I think this particular shot says everything about what he's just achieved. Okay. You can get lots of these types of shots. The National Centre for it is down not far from Bala, but again, if you're doing competition shots, it is all about, if you're doing sports shots, it's all about competition, because generally if they're not competing, you don't get the same looks on their faces and the hard work that they put into actually wanting to win. So this is down at Bala. This is another triathlon. This is in Llanberis, and again this was, they were coming through. He was in the lead, but he actually dropped his bike, and how quickly he got it up. He still had the run after it to actually make up that time. But the look on his face as well, when he turned around and started carrying on running, say he wasn't too pleased with himself. So we're very fortunate to have a lot of major international sports events in Snowdonia. So we were talking before about sky use it or lose it. Well, what do we do when the conditions aren't right for the bigger picture? It is about going in closer, and in this particular case, what I'd noticed, that leaf was there, but I did notice that it's in autumn, obviously with the leaves that colour, but there was a slight gap and all the leaves were actually coming down. So we wanted very, very shutter speeds, and with all these leaves made it the river of fire. Okay, Sean?
John, just before we move on to the next one, there's loads and loads of questions going through about filters and things. Are you a fan of eddy filters and so on, or do you use any at all, or what?
I have been doing it up to now in post-production, but like lots of other photographers, I am now going back to using graduated and neutral density. I think the more you can actually do in camera and the less time you spend on the computer means that more time can be spent out in the field. I did buy one of Rowell's filters, the graduated, and I have started using that and really getting used to it. Neutral density, I could have done more with this one. I haven't started using them again, but certainly this autumn I'll be using neutral density a lot more to be able to balance this off and get the longer shutter speeds that you actually want.
Do you tend to be using a lot of wide-angle lenses rather than telephotos as such, really? Have you got, because there's different kind of trains of thoughts with different landscape photographers, isn't there? I know you kind of feel the image, that's what you're on about, but do you kind of really navigate more towards a wide than a long, or what's your kind of preference?
If I was out, I said I take the compacts when I'm walking out into the mountains. If I was walking out and I did take my big camera, I would only generally use the standard, or my standard, which is 24:105, and that's purely because of weight. If I'm out and I'm not particularly far from the road, then I would take the full range of lenses, because I do use very wide angle 17-40, but probably a lot of them are taken on the 75-300. Lots of my landscape work are on telephoto lenses.
Thanks, John. Sorry, I'll continue on. Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay, autumn, again, we go down into what's called Artist's Wood as my favourite place for autumn shots, and that's where we'll be taking our workshop people this weekend. The colours are just turning, and to me this is, it's a time when it takes a while if you're down there. I find that you have to really relax before you start getting and seeing, and you know, these close-ups are all about seeing. Where a lot of the ones in mountains are responding to what's happening around you and are done in a responsive nature, these are ones where it's about seeing little detail in things and then wanting to actually capture them. And I find it takes quite a while to actually wind down, calm down, really just sit there for a while until things start coming to you, and then looking for different things within that intimate landscapes, we call it, or elements. This is Swallow Falls, which is just up from where the Artist's Wood, and I didn't want just a picture of the falls, but I'd seen these branches in front of it, and what I wanted was to give the power of those falls behind it, or actually to show an intimate part, which is the changing of the seasons, which are the branches on this trees. Okay, next. You may see some of these are square, some are oblong, 16 by 9, and some of them are full frame. I'm certainly a believer of trying these different formats, all from the same you know, original picture, but picking out elements with it. And I tend to use these very much in the art. If you look on the website and see, I do series of art photographs. So I do, you know, tends to be a series of 6, and that again is a project. It could be a book, it could be, you know, this is called Rock on a Frozen Lake, and to me this was a square format because everything was white, but there was just these little bits floating around on it. And this is, you know, a format that works with art type pictures. Okay, next one. Again, looking for detail, what was happening here, in effect, we're on to the 16 by 9 version now, as I said, was that winter was starting to lose its grip in Snowdonia. And I went out one day just trying to show that, you know, it had lost its grip, and I thought of many ways of actually doing it. But to me, this became the final version, that this was so delicate that this could have gone at any time, that it highlighted the fact that it was at last leaving us, and, you know, we had spring and summer to look forward to, not particularly from a photographic point of view, but just there had been a long, hard winter. We'd been snowed in a few times. But that was not to say the photography wasn't phenomenal, and I was exhausted by the time I got this particular one because I've been out so much during that winter. Right, we're getting very recent now. What happens on the change of the seasons, we're looking now very much to autumn, and there had been forecast, lots of inversions, and lots of mists, and certainly that's what happened last week. I went down early one morning, there's this bridge at Brennan, and I was looking for these rays of light, in effect, that were shooting through. I know at certain times of the year that the light shoots under that bridge. Hello?
Sorry about that, John. I forgot I hadn't paused the screen.
All right. Okay, the light, I know at certain times of the year that the light shoots through under that bridge, and that's what I went looking for that morning. But when I saw this, the way it was raking across it, this was my preferred shot on that particular morning. Okay. This was very much grab shot walking back to the car. There's these trees over Brennan, and it was actually just raking through it. I could hardly see, it was that bright in my eyes. I was standing in the middle of the road. And just it was just a scene shot, and then a car sort of, I didn't even see the car, I was blinded that much, but I was really quite pleased with this image when I actually looked at it. Not manipulated in any way, you know, what you see is what you get. Okay.
Just before we move on from that one, John, a couple of questions going through during the course of the session about lens flare and kind of how you shield the lens. I mean, any tips and advice, especially when you're shooting in towards the sun?
It is a problem. There's absolutely no doubt about that. In this particular one, you'll see at the bottom, it really is sort of blown out. But to me, you know, those rakes of light actually made that, so it didn't particularly bother me. I use lens hoods sometimes. Marion's with me. I use Marion to shade further out in front of me, and I get down behind her. But a lot of the dramatic shots can be into the light, so you do have to manage it, but be aware of it. And you know, Marion holds things up in front of me, whether it's, you know, a coat that she's got or whatever, just to, you know, offset the worst part of it. Okay.
There's a photographer in the Netherlands, and a guy called Josh Sprangers, and he uses a pop-up black umbrella. And it's quite funny because I've been out on workshops with him, and he pops it up out of the way, and you think, oh my God, it's Mary Poppins from another land arrived, and he uses that to actually shield it. I always say invest into a lens hood, but no, he uses umbrella, and you can see why at times, because he gets shots that you could never even think about it. I thought, well, if you get wet as well, it's a double-up tool.
Well,
so,
the strange thing, there's a great photographer that's just moved up here. We actually helped get him a job and some accommodation, called Nick Livesey, and he always takes a brolly out with him in Snowdonia, and I was taking the mick out of him one day. But now we've got two uses for it, haven't we? We've got the fact that it could, you know, protect the lens. I know he waits around a lot, where I'm very responsive. He'll know a shot that he wants, and he'll sit there for ages until the light that he wants to see on that landscape, you know, gets into touch. But he loves just sitting there taking in the whole of the landscape. So everybody's got different approaches to the way things are done. But yeah, he always takes this brolly out, so I will not be lacking at him in future.
Thanks, John.
Okay, we can go on to the next one now then. Hello.
It's coming.
Okay. Again, this is in Capel funny enough, where Nick lives, and he was really peeved because he didn't get up this morning and you know, get these sort of shots. But again, this is all about you know, looking for the light. Certainly on that tree, I made a few different you know, ways of looking at it. This is the one I decided in the end. The sheep were important to me, as was the rock on the left. And it was just those layers of light, because you can see light just touching the trees in the front, in the middle, and at the back. All those elements were important to me when I took this shot. Okay. Right, sheep. There is a story, I won't be able to tell it online, about me and a sheep, which when we met on Snowdon, when it woke me up one morning by licking my face. But as we can't be telling that story online today. But they, you know, he wouldn't move from this shot, so I thought, right, well, you're going in it then. And, you know, I put this shot in really to say we play our games in this mountain environment, but we must never forget that it's a working environment. I was talking to a shepherd once in winter, and he'd been out for 27 hours trying to get lambs and things out of the snowdrifts. So although we play our games in this mountain environment, as I say, we must never ever forget that it's a working environment. Okay, next one please. Again, the same morning as the other one, and this is looking the opposite way, so you're always looking for different viewpoints in effect. What was important to me on this one, again, was, you see the way the light on the left is just touching the tops of all those trees, the main tree, but the one to the right with the sheep under it was very, very important to me, to give it that sort of, you know, just to take your eye finally to there before you start going all around it to the touches of light. Okay. This is the final one, and put this in to say, really, I've absolutely adored this landscape since I was 14. I can never understand why it's never gone away. You know, I give a talk about it. I was saying to Jay about, it's called The Size of the Rat. which says if I'm not out, Marion will see that I'm uncomfortable if I haven't been out for a while, because there's this rat gnawing away inside, wanting to be out, wanting to be immersed in this landscape, and wanting to really, for the rest of however long I've got left, you've made this decision to come here and to really get under the skin of this landscape and to document it to the very, very best of my ability, and to bring through the workshops to inspire other people. I'm a great believer in teaching and passing on all of the things that I've learned over the years. But the things I will advise to people, if you like, is that it's not about equipment. It's not about all. You have to learn your camera. I think it was Joe Cornish, was it, that said, yes, learn your camera, and then really leave it. Have an infallible technique and then leave it to chance. So they're right. You must understand your camera. Don't get bogged down because you tend to miss the shots. If people said to me, well, how do you do that? I'd say, well, to me, it's on 100 SA. I'll leave it at f8, and I'll move it from there if I sort of have to. And that's my way of working. It's all about immersing yourself. It's all about seeing that landscape, and it's all about just loving being out in that environment, even if you do have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever, or sleep on the mountain to get the shots that you actually want. Now that leaves about 15 minutes, which you said you didn't want leaving at the end, roughly.
Oh, we've got questions coming out of our ears, John, so don't think. That's why I was, I'm sorry if I pushed the slides forward a little bit too quickly at times there. But, okay, so let's kind of address the basic one. I know you travel light and kind of, it is all about the image, but people have got to start somewhere with their camera and so on.
Yeah.
First of all, before we get to the equipment part, let's talk about the getting involved with landscape photography. How does somebody really start to take the amazing images that you are doing?
Well, it's about, there's no doubt that we have an advantage because we, live here now. But, we've made lots of sacrifices to be able to do that. And it's about total commitment, and it's about love, and it's about wanting to be there, and it's about giving up a lot of things, to be, because if people just come at weekends, like I always remember a guy at a lecture came up to me at half time, and I'd done I spent a year in a valley. We spent a year on a sheep farm, just looking at every aspect of it to document. And this guy came up to me and said, "Oh, I've cancelled my holidays. I've told my wife we're coming down to this valley of yours." And I thought, does he realise that 29 times out of 30 when I pass through that valley, there won't be the conditions that you see in the photographs that I show. So it's, you will see the ones that I've picked up, but the disappointments, as I alluded to in the talk, and you have to get over that. Why do we love it so much? Because it is so unpredictable. It is because I never know what I'm getting. It is because it's the palette, and I have to find the inspiration of the paint and the atmosphere that I want to put onto that. It is about knowing your area. So my advice would be to get started is, don't think you have to rush around all over the different landscapes. Find a small landscape that you can move into, even if it's your local park, and fully understand that landscape and get to understand the different weather conditions and and don't be afraid of the rain. Still go out in the rain, go in closer, really study that landscape. The last shot that you saw before that was the valley that me and Marion spent a year doing nothing else but immersing ourselves, and the detail that came out of that year's work was just phenomenal. So you see more if you stay and concentrate, and that's why I allude to projects, because I believe instead of photograph today, what we're going to do tomorrow, all this type of thing, we'll start having photograph projects. Our project over the next couple of weeks obviously is going to be autumn. We know where to go for autumn, but we also know that we need to be spreading our wings, so we've chosen a different valley that we're going to go looking down this year. I was amazed that recently we've been doing a lot of work for the Tourists Association by doing stock shots and things I wouldn't normally do, or places that I wouldn't normally go. And sometimes you miss a trick by being too limited. So to go back to it, advice, even if it's the local park, really study it and get to know it in depth and all of its little idiosyncrasies.
And stay
Okay.
safe as well, isn't it? I mean, we mustn't forget that, especially when you start to get into these extreme locations with it. Safety has got to be.
Safety is everything.
Yeah.
You know, we do talks for the mountain rescue where we raise funds for them. Absolutely wonderful guys, and when I'm talking to them later, they say they never ever judge people. Whatever difficulties they get into, they don't judge people. But you must always put your own safety before any shot that you ever take. Yeah, certainly.
Cool. As far as the marketing and the sales of your images and so on, what's the market like for selling landscapes and things? Is it a difficult thing?
It's dropped a lot. Agency type work has dropped off a lot. I know series professionals who do it that are moving into time lapses and things that the ordinary photographer can't do. That's what you have to do now if you want to make that sort of money out of it. Because we've made a lifestyle choice in effect, our preferred methods are, I'm the chairman of the Snowdonia Arts Festival now, because I want something slightly different from photography, but it's still an art. And yes, we will be bringing photography into that and having exhibitions and things, but we believe really my passion now is workshops and teaching other people, and even photo holidays, that people that don't know this area and just want to come down and they're competent and efficient enough. If you only had a week in Yosemite, say, would you just try and find those places yourself, or would you hook up with a local photographer who knew the areas which were most photographically? And it's things like that which inspire me.
I was recently in Bath on one weekend, and the weekend before I was in Dublin, and it was amazing how many photographers were out on the streets, actually selling their urban landscape or city scenes or landscapes themselves. I think if you're in big cities, and that would include, I suppose, John, in some way, living in and around the Snowdonia, which is obviously the National Park of Wales, and being there and around, you have an opportunity that perhaps somebody in a city doesn't have. However, there's still that opportunity to sell your images, just sticking them into a local cafe, present them well, stick a price on them, get a commission going with the local coffee shops and things, really, and there's a chance that you're going to be selling some of your images. So never just think that it's just for the big boys there. There's always ways to actually make money. It depends on how much money you need to earn. There's a different discussion on that. Right, let's get into post-production. How much post-production are you doing, John?
Very little, and people get surprised at that. I don't want to be spending lots of time. Okay, black and white might be slightly different. I do spend a bit of time on those. But the color ones, I'm really only looking to bring them back from the raw image into what I actually saw. So that's really only, I don't take things out. Things changed for me a few years ago, certainly when I don't enter any competitions now or anything, but when I used to, I'd spent over an hour waiting for elements to come together. It was in Essaouira in Morocco, and there's these huge Atlantic rollers breaking over the rocks, but I knew it needed an element, so I was waiting for this bird to fly through this. And some judge came along and said, if you put that bird in Photoshop, you've put it in the wrong place. And I was destroyed at that point, because I then understood that nobody in the future would ever believe you. So, I have to make it absolutely clear now that anybody that looks at my pictures will know that that is what I actually saw and felt. And yes, there's room for interpretation in black and white, like the one you're seeing in front. I wanted him to be particularly dark in effect, so you can tone it down. But certainly in the colours is what you see, is what you get.
Brilliant. Let's just do a bit on equipment for a minute, John. Lots of questions going through. Wide angle, first of all, I know that you said you shoot some stuff on your compact camera and everything else, but if we kind of concentrate
on...
This one
in front of you is a compact, yeah.
Yeah, but if we concentrate where you can change the lens on a camera,
right, yeah.
do you use a full frame or do you use a cut frame sensor, or what do you use, or what body do you use?
It's the original 5D.
Okay, full frame then.
We've got full frame 5Ds, yeah.
Yeah, and what's your two preferences in lenses? So if you could only take two out with you, what would they be?
There's 17 to 40 and there's 75 to 300.
And have you got a preferred working aperture as such really? I mean, the biggest questions on these, it's about the depth of field, because obviously your images are showing so much depth, so much sharpness. Yeah. That's where the technical part is coming through in this.
Yeah, as I say, if I'm responding to the landscape, then it's always left on f8 type of thing, and then it's majority is on a tripod. Although I'm finding a bit more nowadays that they seem to be so good, these lenses and things, that I can even handhold the 75 to 300 if I'm stuck. But I prefer to put it on the tripod. And what was the original question?
No, you did that as far as the aperture was concerned and so on. Have you got a preferred aperture?
And then I'm moving it from there. If I'm down by the stream there, then obviously I want that particular one you saw before. You're moving up to your f11s type of thing. But my lenses, or lenses in general, I'm finding they work the best at around the f8 mark. So keep it at that unless you have to move it.
Brilliant. Okay, let's stay on the equipment for a minute. I just will say though, we were playing recently. Jay, do you remember what Fuji bridge camera it was? I forgot what it was. It was about 500 quid, and it had a lens on it which was extremely wide to very extremely long with it, and we couldn't believe, because it was sealed as well as far as it was weatherproof, and it was just the most amazing little well, not DSLR because it's a bridge camera, it's fixed lens with it, but just amazing bit of kit that you can get on the market today, isn't it?
I found on the G1X, which I've got, the Canon one, before, when I'd gone into the mountains with a compact, I was always, what happens if I really got a top-class image and it was degraded because of this? The G1X was the first time that I fully trust that I can get an image the same quality as my DSLRs. The future, I believe, isn't in DSLRs. I think it will go to mirrorless type of cameras. The technology is moving that way. They will have changeable lenses. I can't see cameras lasting the way that we see the 5Ds in the future.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's kind of just, we've got about 2 minutes left. Let me just say the thanks. We've got to leave us for lunch and so on. Guys, thank you. So, John, if you stay online for a minute, we'll just kind of just a few more questions if that's okay with you. But I just want to say, everybody, thanks for joining John and I for lunch today. John Rowell, on behalf of all the Photographer Academy and those who are actually joining us online today, thank you so much for giving up some of your time with us. And thanks for all of you out there that you've given your kind of your lunch times up. Jay's going to be posting some, or he already has, where you can get in touch with John, kind of about workshops and everything else. Probably the quickest way is just go through the chasingthelight.co.uk. That's chasingthelight.co.uk, and you can actually see what is going on with John and kind of so on with it. Loads of people here, John, saying amazing photographs. Thanks so much for sharing it today. Can't wait to actually get up to Snowdonia and steal some of John's light. There's just loads and loads and loads and loads of thank yous going on with here. So thank you so much on that with it. John, anything you want to kind of, those who've got to leave us now, anything you want to finish off with before we just finalise the few questions left?
I'm just thanking people for joining it in and showing an interest in my work from Snowdonia, which is obviously a passion and a love of mine and Marianne's. And if ever you do want to come to Snowdonia and you want to meet up, we spend a lot of time with our good friends in the Shabod Cafe, which is in Capel. Paul does put on exhibitions in there for me at any time that I want. And the books that went with that exhibition. You know, we do make them because it's all about this project. Otherwise, you're just taking images unless you have some sort of control. In the future, you know, this computer will probably, it's all noughts and ones, it'll go in the bin. I believe books will last forever. So I do encourage people, get projects, make blurb type books if you can't afford to have them published, and really, you know, put a body of work together and finish it off with producing a book. Thank you very much for joining us.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. Guys, there's been a lot of questions going through about Eddie filters, no experience, wanted to do it. If you can't get onto one of John's workshops soon, want a little bit more information, Jay's posted a link, in fact. I'll just do it again. This is one of our films with Nigel Forster, one of our landscape guys on the Photography Academy. Check out Nigel's film on that because he really does explain all about basics of using EDs and graduates and everything else with it. It's well worth your 15 minutes watching that one and so on. John, let's just finish off with a few questions from you if I can. Again, on behalf of Jay and myself, thank you so much for again agreeing to us to actually have you as our kind of guest webinar today. Let's just finish off with a few more questions. We talked about the post-production, the composition. Are you really composing at camera stage, or are you allowing yourself a little bit of room that you can kind of post-crop the shot later on and so on?
I'm finding more shots nowadays for my landscape work, certainly the one in front of you there. I'm finding more and more I'm cropping them to 16 by 9 in the Max, which we use because it's a default. You can have square, you can have 16 by 9 or the original one. But I'm finding more and more. So I won't define it to that. Obviously, you know, the photo is composed in the camera and that's what you see. But no, I feel that if it suits 16 by 9, then I'll certainly go to that. And more of my shots are going to 16 by 9 for the landscape. For the art prints, which I say are in series of 6, I tend to find a square format. So I'll be looking, because I know the series, I've done a series up in the slate mines of just the patterns in slate and called it Aspects of Slate. But I knew when I was doing that project that they would be square because of the way the art print. You'll see them on the website if you go into the art prints. But no, I wouldn't stick them to the you know, the original format.
Brilliant. Michelle was being a bit critical of you there. She's just gone to your website to book a workshop, and there's nothing on there that she can book a workshop on. So she's having, Michelle, get in touch with John from his website. I'm sure they'll take your money. And again, it's just remember, photography is a passion for many of us, and it's just not a business kind of thing. So again, it's about we can't do it all, as it were. To Sue Lloyd, who's watching the webinar on an iPhone, laying on a sunbed in Snowdonia, I don't care. I really don't care at all, Sue. And please don't get burnt on our behalf, as it were. Just the last question, really. Yeah, you can all stop saying you're jealous of Sue. We'll ignore all that now. Okay, we don't care about Sue at all. We hope she doesn't get burnt anyway. Last question. When people are in focus in one of your photographs, do you need to get their permission if you're going to publish them at all?
It's a tricky one. If they're backs of people, which sometimes we actually do, then no. But I'm all for really engaging with people rather than just taking pictures. I always remember going back to the days in Himalayas and things. That's when I really got interested in photographing people, and I did always ask for the people when I took those. Urban landscapes, people who've got on the website, you know, I've done a lot in Liverpool, which is, you know, it gives me a contrast to the work that's in Snowdonia. If there's people in them, certainly children, you know, you tend to not even try to publish that, to be honest.
John,
it's a difficult one.
Sorry, John, that's it. Thank you so much. As I said before, joining us for lunch. This is officially the end of the webinar. Let me just stop recording. We'll try and put some links and things on our Facebook page. Otherwise, you'll kind of catch them during the film and so on with it. So thank you all for joining us today.